the Museum of the Paris Prefecture of Police. In these showcases, we find the most incredible collection of objects from France's gruesome criminal history. The peephole through which Dr. Thiennot watched his victims in their death throes, the cord used to strangle the bailiff, Goofy, and the oven Henry Longy used to dispose of his widowed victims. Knives, revolvers, clubs, these weapons were all used to commit the most abominable crimes. Starting in the 19th century, police began using science to solve their investigations, drawing on anthropometry, the study of the human iris, graphology, and morphophysiology. In the museum archives, investigation reports, interrogation scripts, and crime scene sketches will lead us along the bloody trail of the greatest murderers in history. It is in La Brenne, the land of 1,000 lakes, during the last days of 1946, that a tragedy will unfold, marking the start of a judicial case lasting to the present day. France is in the middle of rebuilding itself and has just come out of the war. The youth, some of whom had joined the Marquis French resistance, remain trigger-happy, while certain police officers have maintained their bad habits. The interrogation methods used by the Gestapo proved effective. So why not use them when dealing with criminals? The death of a gamekeeper, employed by a wealthy industrialist who owned a vast estate in Saint-Michel-en-Brenne, is quickly attributed to a group of hunters, including Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot, who initially admit to their crime before retracting their confessions. They claim that they were tortured to force them into signing their confessions. A prominent figure versus poor peasants. This is the story of the denunciation of exploitation by those in power. One man takes up their cause. More than 30 years after the case, he publishes a book titled Ils sont innocents, They Are Innocent, and forms a support committee for Mies and Thiennot. He tirelessly stirs up the media, demanding a retrial and the rehabilitation of the convicted. He will manage to associate Mies and Thiennot with the notion of judicial error in the collective memory. The justice system, however, will remain firmly convinced of the guilt of the two men. So who should we believe? Mies and Thiennot, innocent or guilty? On Sunday, 29th December 1946, Louis Bostard, gamekeeper of the Blizon estate, owned by Mr. Lebadi, a wealthy sugar industrialist, leaves his home around 2 p.m. He plans to walk around the property to check that no hunters are present. He tells his wife that he won't be home too late. On the same day, the Mies family organizes a hunting party with friends. 13 people pile into a van that will take them to the Jacques Desbois woods, owned by Christian Grosjean, a member of the group, accompanied by his servant Albert Nisseron. It's a group of young people from the area, but this is a vast area that we're talking about because there are some from Mézières-en-Brenne, some from Saint-Michel-en-Brenne, and also from PALLAS, from Saint-Genou, 30-40 kilometers away. There are 2 butchers from Saint-Genou, the oldest ones, a son of a gendarme from PALLAS, Sir André, and his cousin, who is only 14. It seems, at least that's what they claim, that they didn't know each other the day before their meeting, not even in the hour leading up to it. They knew each other in groups of 2 or 3. They claim they met by chance, in a way, fortuitous meetings, like people do in life. The merry group arrives in the forest around 3 p.m., but after not finding any game, they head back to La Blinerie, the Mies family farm, to have a bite to eat. They return to the woods afterward, where Gabriel Thiennot shoots a rabbit, and several shots are fired at a flock of larks, but according to the hunters, they missed. Finally, except for Gabriel Thiennot, everyone returns empty-handed, and the van leaves around 5:30 p.m. That afternoon, a party had been organized at the Blaison Chateau by the owner of the estate. So, Madame Boistard goes with her two daughters to the Blaison party, which brought all the people who worked on the estate together. It was a small Christmas celebration, and her husband was supposed to join her on the way back to do some of the walk together because it was getting dark. But when she returned from the chateau, from the party, she didn't meet her husband. He didn't come back that evening. And during the night, she started to worry. Maybe something had happened to him. She was afraid something had gone wrong. So it was at this moment that she decided to go see Mr. Béthuin, the estate manager. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. when Mr. Béthuin alerted the police. And on Monday morning, they began the search with everyone available, trying to figure out where Louis Boistard could be. The search for the gamekeeper continues throughout the day, but in vain. The next day, on the 31st of December 1946 at 8 a.m., the search resumes. At 9:15, the body of the gamekeeper is finally discovered. It is lying in the Souls Pond on the Blaison estate, 500 meters from the Take Care of Yourself farm, run by Mr. Désiré Brunet, a farmer working for Mr. Le Baudy. The gendarmes make their first observations. Mr. Boistard is lying face down, about 1.5 meters from the shore, with his face against the bottom of the pond. He is dressed in a greenish-gray velvet jacket and trousers, with a pair of rubber boots, one of which has come off his foot. The jacket is slightly pulled over his back, partially covering his head, exposing a leather belt and braces. Everything indicates that the body was dragged to be submerged in the pool. His leather game bag, cap, and shotgun are found around the body in the water, likely thrown by the murderer after placing the corpse in the pool. There are no signs of a struggle and no spent cartridges found around the crime scene. Just one footprint is found, a very clear imprint of a clog, seemingly left by someone leaving the water, undoubtedly the person who had dragged his body into the pond. At 3:30 p.m., the examining magistrate, Mr. Halon, accompanied by the forensic doctor, Dr. Bouguerel, and officers from the 17th Mobile Police Brigade from Limoges, arrive at the scene. The gendarmes handle typically everyday crimes, but since 1911, the Minister of Justice, Bartu at the time, who would later be assassinated in 1934 alongside the King of Yugoslavia in Marseille, decided that for any serious crimes, such as murder or significant crimes where the perpetrators were unknown, magistrates would systematically refer to the Regional Mobile Brigade of Judicial Police. This is how the division of responsibility works. So initially, the gendarmes are called for things like rabbit poaching, accidents, suicides, and so on. But as soon as the case is more complicated, it's the Regional Judicial Police who take charge. The gamekeeper's body is removed from the water. His velvet jacket is pierced by 2 large holes, one under the armpit and the other on his left flank, clearly caused by 2 shotgun blasts. An examination of the body reveals that he was carrying no identification. His watch has stopped at 5:05 p.m., which the lead investigator, Commissioner Darrow, believes to be the time of the murder. In his pocket, a knife, a lighter, and two 16 caliber shotgun cartridges are found. Inside his game bag, there are 5 full cartridges and 1 spent shell. The shotgun, an Ideal brand 16 caliber, is unloaded. I discovered in the case file I had access to that there were 2 reports. One was kept and the other was clearly ignored. The report from the commissioner leading the investigation says, on the gamekeeper's body, we found a watch that reads 1705. Already this was an interpretation that he had no reason to make because a watch doesn't mark 1705 at that moment. It was used to explain that this was the time the body was thrown into the water. But there's a second report written by the gendarmes that say, we found a watch on the body and it reads 1705. That's normal. We wound the mechanism and it started running again. So it simply shows the time when the mechanism naturally unwound. It was a spring at the time, not like modern watches. So this watch no longer tells us anything significant. At 4:15 p.m., Dr. Bouguerel begins his autopsy. He finds that the gamekeeper, Bostard, was hit by 4 shots, which hit his right shoulder, kidneys, arms, and left armpit. His report states that the wound on the left arm is 4 centimeters wide, containing a 16-gauge red Gabelle wad with a yellow tip, with the shot seemingly caliber 4. The shot was fired at point-blank range. On the left side, the wound is 6 centimeters long by 3 centimeters wide. The shot struck the lower ends of the 9th and 10th ribs, crushing the left kidney and causing significant and heavy hemorrhaging. The victim's body was horizontal, or in other words, lying flat. The right forearm and right shoulder are riddled with pellets that barely entered the skin, spraying an area of about 20 centimeters by 15 centimeters. On the left side of the kidneys and in the middle, another spray of pellets was observed. These last 2 shots were fired from a distance of just a few meters. The gamekeeper's stomach is filled with a whitish substance. He was digesting his food when he was shot. A number of people attended the autopsy, including the chief gamekeeper, René Bonnot, and representatives from the Blizon Company, who are present at the autopsy, which is unthinkable. The gamekeeper, René Bonnot, told me when I met him during the investigation that I carried out, you know, it was hard. It was hard to witness that because he was a friend. And so the autopsy goes on like that. And when we rediscovered the autopsy report, it was very curious because it's full of crossings out. So we no longer know how gamekeeper Bostard received the 4 gunshots. When questioned, Mrs. Bostard reveals that her husband had been the target of threats from several individuals, notably Gabriel Thiennot, a resident of Mézeray-en-Brenne, who had told him that he would take him down. She further explains that there had been an altercation with the Mise family, who lived at the Blenay farm. They had stolen an otter trap and were apparently poaching on the Blizon land. When she had warned her husband that a group of hunters had gathered at the Blinerie, he had responded, "I'll have to go take a look at the Hondaire to keep an eye on them." Mr. Betounet, the estate manager, confirms the presence of several hunters at the Mise farm. Mr. Brunet, Mr. Lebaudy's farmer living at the Take Care of Yourself farm, was hunting on the 29th of December and heard a dispute near the Jacques Desbout woods around 3:30 p.m. He did not see the participants, but distinctly heard a man shout, "Screw you!" A quarter of an hour later, when leaving the woods, he saw a van full of hunters heading back towards the Blinerie. with gamekeeper Bostard coming from the place where he'd heard the argument. Mr. Brunet's servants claimed to have seen the van with the hunters pass around 3 p.m., coming from the Blinnery and heading towards Mizier. An hour later, the same van passed by again, still with the hunters, but in the opposite direction. Shortly after, as he was heading to Luc, he saw gamekeeper Bostard crouching behind the hedge at Haute Hondière Pond. He was hiding, seemingly to watch something or someone on the other side of the pond. He was holding his rifle in his right hand. When police arrived at the Haute Hondière Pond, near the hedge marking the boundary between the Blizon estate and the Nice land, they discovered 2 greasy hunting wads, 2 filling wads, and 2 16-gauge shotgun cartridges. These clues raised serious suspicions about the group of hunters. A search was conducted at the Nice family home at the Blinnery. Among the items discovered, a torn, blood-stained overcoat, sealed object number 1. A pair of blue canvas trousers, wet and blood-stained, sealed object number 2. A torn blue woolen pair of pants, wet, sealed object number 3. A double-barrel 16-gauge shotgun missing the right firing pin. This was the gun used by the Mies sons, Raymond and Stanislas, when they went hunting. Sealed object number 6. A single-shot 20-gauge shotgun. Sealed object number 7. 4 16-gauge shotgun cartridges, pellets of varying sizes, and a pouch of shot. Sealed object number 8. Another search is carried out at Gabriel Thiennot's residence in Mézières-en-Brie. Investigators seize a double-barrel 16-gauge shotgun, which Gabriel Thiennot had used during the hunting party. Sealed object number 17. They also found 2 cartridges, one black 16-gauge containing number 6 shot, and the other red, also 16-gauge, containing number 4 shot. The red cartridge contains a Gable-type wad, red with yellow ends. Sealed object number 18. We had accumulated a large amount of material evidence. The investigators wanted to support the confessions with the material evidence, but it turns out that all the material evidence, upon further investigation, will ultimately be declared null and void. For example, a sweater that had been taken from the Mies family home, which was supposedly worn by Raymond Mies when he carried the body. The theory was that it got stained with the victim's blood while transporting the body. However, when the analysis came back, it turned out that it was rabbit blood, not human blood, so the sweater brought nothing. It added nothing to the case. We had seized Raymond Mies's shotgun, but the gun could only fire 1 shot, whereas 2 had been fired. The gunsmith from Mézières-en-Brie came forward and explained that a few days before the hunt, Raymond Mies had brought the gun in for repair. The gunsmith had told him that it wasn't worth fixing, because the cost would exceed the value of the gun. So the shotgun that was made to fire 2 shots could only fire 1, as it was missing a firing pin. Another piece of evidence that turned out to be useless was a plaster mold of a footprint that was supposedly from the person who had dragged the gamekeeper's body into the Soul's pond. This plaster model of the imprint was compared with Raymond Mies's clog, but the analysis revealed that there was no connection between the two. So all the material evidence disappeared. When questioned, the hunters denied any involvement in the gamekeeper's death, and moreover, they claimed that they had not encountered him during their hunting trip. They said they stayed on the land of their friend Grosjean, and never went near the Haute Hondière Pond. They returned empty-handed, having shot at a flock of larks but missed them. Only Gabriel Thiennot managed to kill a rabbit. The police went to the location where the hunters claimed to have shot at the larks, but they found no empty shells or wads on the ground. The hunters explained that they had collected everything. It's interesting to note that all these people who are gathered and questioned one by the police were held together at Blanc police station. They were placed together, and as they started talking amongst themselves, the police overheard them. There was no doubt in the officers' minds that some of them were guilty. The people there, who had sobered up after what had happened, realized they were complicit in a murder. They knew exactly who the murderers were, so they started talking and getting anxious. At this point, there was neither collusion nor physical threats. No, if you talk, you'll see what happens. They were just talking amongst themselves, as they hadn't been interrogated yet. This is why someone like Mr. Lecoq, who was in charge of the police station in Blanc, which had been nationalized during the war, had no doubt because he overheard them talking amongst themselves. Continuing their investigation, the police questioned several witnesses who confirmed that they had heard gunshots around 4:30 p.m. coming from the direction of the Haute Rondière Pond. Henry Gaspard, a local farmer, stated that Grosjean and Niceron had visited him around 5 p.m. When describing their hunting trip, they mentioned having argued with a gamekeeper, but didn't specify his name. Armed with this testimony, the police go and question Niceron, and soon he puts everything on the table. Niceron explains that they had been invited by the Mies family, along with his boss Grosjean and 13 other hunters. They had first gone into the Jacques de Beau woods, where they spread out. As Niceron and his group approached the property of Monsieur Le Baudy, they heard an argument between the other hunters and the gamekeeper. Grosjean fired a shot into the air to bring the group back together. "The gamekeeper Bostard made us run," said Stanislaw Mies when the group had reassembled. The van then headed back to the La Blinerie. There, Father Mies and 2 other Polish hunters left the troop, and the van set off again in the direction of the Haute Rondière Pond. "If I see the guard, I'll shoot him," Raymond Mies is reported to have said, a remark that met with the approval of the other hunters. On reaching the pond, the group split in two. Raymond Mies and his brother Stanislaw, Gabriel Thiennot, and Bernard Chouvet entered the Le Baudy property, while the others stayed on the Mies land. It wasn't long before they spotted the guard heading their way. Raymond Mies asked him to stop, but as Bostard continued to advance, he shouldered his gun and fired his 2 cartridges. The wounded guard continued to stagger forward before collapsing. Gabriel Thiennot then approached and fired 2 shots at point-blank range. Having hidden the body in the rushes bordering the pond, the group entered to the Mies property, shot into the air to make it seem like they were shooting a lark, and continued their hunt. Niceron adds that the day after the tragedy, Raymond Mies came to find him at the farm and told him that if he spoke, he would break his face. Christian Grosjean confirms the account given by his employee. On Friday, the 3rd of January, and Saturday, the 4th of January, 1947, the investigators arrested the hunters to interrogate them. So the investigation proceeded simply with the goal of obtaining confessions. In fact, there was no real investigation. Rather, there was pressure applied to those held in order to make them confess. This is reflected in the press of the time, which serialized the case day after day. They haven't confessed, but it won't be long. You see, the focus was on the confessions. The guilty parties were, in the eyes of everyone, already identified, except for the fact that they weren't confessing. And then the wait started to feel long, because after 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, there were still no results. On the 5th of January, Gabriel Thiennot confessed. It was Inspector Vidal who recorded his statement. For collective memory, this police officer left his testimony on a video cassette. At the request of Commissioner Darrow, I was tasked with conducting the interrogation of Gabriel Thiennot, one of the murderers. I informed Mr. Darrow that I wanted to be alone for this operation, without anyone disturbing me at any point. He knew that I often obtained confessions under these conditions. Therefore, on the 5th of January 1947, in the morning, I proceeded alone, one-on-one with him, to this interrogation in a room at the Mézières-en-Brenne town hall. It wasn't easy to get him to confess. He denied it for a long time, despite the evidence I could put to him. I told him it was difficult to deny the evidence and contest the testimonies that had been collected. Towards the end of the morning, crying, Thiennot confessed to his participation in the murder of gamekeeper Boistard. It was Raymond Mies who fired first at the gamekeeper, who collapsed, explains Thiennot. He then approached and fired his 2 shots at point-blank range. The hunters then shot in the air to make it look like they were hunting a skylark, and the group returned to the Blinnery. Working together, the hunters decided to move the body, which was too close to the Mies property. Gabriel Thiennot, Raymond Mies, and his brother Stanislaw, accompanied by another hunter, Bernard Chouvet, returned to the body and took it a little further to the Soule pond. There, they threw the body into the pond, taking care to retrieve the gamekeeper's notebook, which had their names written in it. After signing his confession, Gabriel Thiennot accompanies the police to the scene of the crime to show them the spot where the gamekeeper was shot. On the 7th of January, Raymond Mies also confesses and confirms Gabriel Thiennot's story. He is the one who searched the gamekeeper's body and retrieved the notebook, which he later burned in the stove at his home. The other hunters will also tell the same story. On the 8th of January 1947, Gabriel Thiennot and Raymond Mies are both charged with murder by Judge Halun. They are incarcerated to Châteauroux prison. Bernard Chouvet, André Chichery, Jean Blanchet, Gervais Thibault, Émile Thibault, and Stanislaw Mies, who were part of the hunting group, are also incarcerated, charged with failing to assist a person in danger of death. A few days later, in a dramatic turn of events, the defendants retract their statements. They claim not to have encountered the gamekeeper, neither the first nor the second time, and therefore, they deny being the ones who fired the shots. From that moment on, following the advice of their lawyer, Maître Latroqui, the defense of the defendants will not change. They state that if they signed confessions, it was because the police tortured them. The war had just ended, but the methods used by the Gestapo to make resistance fighters talk are still fresh in people's memories. They claim that these methods were used to force them to confess. And they point the finger at Commissaire Darrow, who was a policeman during the occupation under the Vichy regime. We need to face the facts. The police and the gendarmerie were shackled by the conditions of the armistice. They were put in a position by the Vichy government under the German orders to serve the Germans. Therefore, their reputation was appalling. Many people think that the French police and the gendarmerie were worse than the Gestapo. Everyone remembers seeing French police guarding and protecting the German military headquarters. And unfortunately, everyone recalls the terrible scenes of Jewish roundups that the Germans craftily made the French administration carry out. So from 1945 until 1949, many policemen, especially from the mobile brigades, were judged and sentenced extremely severely, to the point of death. Therefore, if police officers in 1945 were still on the ground, it meant that nothing had been found against them, because otherwise they would have been at least suspended or temporarily removed from duty while their cases were investigated. However, doubts remain when looking at photos showing the hunters with their faces covered by a blanket during their transfer from the town hall to the gendarmerie. The people of Mézières would later admit that it was impossible to sleep. In fact, it was especially so for the neighbors near the town hall and the gendarmerie who couldn't sleep because they heard harrowing screams coming from the area. People would say, they're getting it, they're suffering, but if they committed the crime, it's right that they suffer. After just under 5 months of investigation, on the 3rd of June 1947, the case is closed. Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot are charged with murder. The trial of Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot takes place on the 24th and 25th of June 1947 at the Court of Assises in Châteauroux. When the president questions them, they confirm their hunting trip, but deny any encounter with gamekeeper Boitard. It's really the trial of torture. That's what's at the forefront of it all. The exchanges are essentially focused on the torture that those in the defendant's box were subjected to. Mies and Thiennot speak about it, saying they were forced to sign confessions whilst being tortured. A version that will never change. In an interview filmed in the 90s, Gabriel Thiennot describes what happened in the town hall of Mézières-en-Brie. So they made us play with a ball with them, back and forth, and we spent whole nights naked, kneeling on iron bars, arms stretched wide, and when we passed out, they'd throw buckets of water on us. My ears were torn, and I had my private parts crushed. So when someone says the police hit them, no one criticizes that kind of statement, because everyone knows they were beaten. Everyone. So slaps, yes, all the time because it was the tradition. You get slapped and all. No more than that because they couldn't leave marks. After that, they'd bring the accused before the examining magistrate. The examining magistrate, if they receive someone with black eyes, okay, that can happen, And then, if they bring people who were tortured to the point that blood splattered on the walls of the town hall to the extent that they had to repaint the walls, and one of them had a testicle torn off, can you imagine? Clearly, no examining magistrate would ever order someone into custody, and no prison director would ever accept people in that state, because they'd be too afraid of being accused themselves of being the ones who inflicted the suffering this person is complaining about. The doubt about the use of torture persists, but the testimony of several witnesses will nevertheless corroborate the investigator's version, and Niceron's statement will seal the deal, especially since he explains he was intimidated by Bernard Chouvet's father, who asked him to retract his confession. He was put in front of a justice of the peace, a lawyer, and a bailiff to sign a disposition, stating that he knew nothing. But before the court, he states bluntly, "I saw Mies shoot first, and I saw Boitard fall." On the 25th of June, after an hour and a half of deliberation, the verdict is pronounced. Thiennot Gabriel and Raymond Mies are sentenced to 15 years of hard labor and 10 years refusal of the right to stay. The court has granted them extenuating circumstances. The first judgment will not be final, and it will lead to a multitude of judicial events. On the 2nd and 3rd of October 1947, at the Magistrates' Court in Leblanc, the trial of the hunters who participated in the tragedy takes place. Maître Letroqui, the lawyer for the Thibault brothers, directly attacks Commissioner Darrow, seeking to highlight the likely use of violent methods to extract confessions from the presumed culprits. He accused Darrow of being a Vichy agent, a part of the Vichy police and so on. Darrow was defended by the local leader, a maverick and partisan, who accused Letroqui of lying. Letroqui later had to apologize to thunderous applause, I would say, of the courtroom. So Darrow was not considered in the area as a collaborator, but rather a policeman. At the end of the trial, the accused are found guilty of voluntary failure to prevent an act qualified as a crime. They are sentenced to prison terms ranging from 2 years to 18 months, depending on the extent of their involvement. The trial in Châteauroux, which saw the conviction of Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot, will be overturned due to a procedural error during the drafting of a trial report, leading to the annulment of the Court of Assise's decision. The case will be retried in Poitiers, this time on the 1st and 2nd of December 1948. Maître Maurice Garçon, lawyer for Mrs. Boitard, and Maître André Letrequi, lawyer for Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot, will be present. But by then, the population has been stirred up by the conditions in which the confessions were obtained. And here, you really feel the rising tide of thought. They're innocent. Confessions were obtained through torture, under duress. It's others who are guilty. They must be hiding something or someone. You see, this sentiment starts to grow very, very strong. So strong that 2 buses full of Berrichans, people from Berry, who aren't exactly revolutionaries, head to Poitiers to show their support. Not to protest, but just be present and show they're there for Mies and Thiennot without expressing it so loud, because people don't make noise in Berry. So on the other hand, there are young people in Poitiers who do make noise. Students from the law school who proclaim Mies and Thiennot innocent. Mies and Thiennot innocent. Now that's a protest. And the Berrichans are surprised to see how big it's getting. Despite the presence of numerous witnesses and a private detective presented by the defense in an attempt to prove that it was impossible for the crime to have been committed by the accused, the judgment remains the same, and the conviction is increased. Mies and Thiennot are sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. They lodge an appeal. Everyone gathers in Bordeaux on the 4th and 5th of July 1950. The verdict remains the same. Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot did indeed kill gamekeeper Boitard. However, mitigating circumstances are granted to them, and they are sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, matching the original sentence from the Châteauroux trial. The case is now legally closed. In 1952, the newspaper La Marseillaise creates a stir by announcing that the key witness for the prosecution, Mr. Niceon, is retracting his confession. He claims to have made false statements dictated by Mr. Lebaudy's steward and asserts that he was the victim of police persuasion, which led him to declare that he had witnessed the murder of the gamekeeper. A document signed by him, in the presence of 5 witnesses and officially recorded by the mayor of Leblanc, attests to the authenticity of this reversal. The next day, the police visit Niceron, who once again claims to have been manipulated. He says he was forced to sign the letter. No further action is taken on this episode. Meanwhile, the hunter's lawyer, Maître Letrequi, claims to know the real killer. Without naming him, he points to Désiré Brunet, the manager of the Take Care of Yourself farm, who claims to have heard an argument between the gamekeeper and the hunters. Again, the police question him, but he maintains his stance, and there's no evidence pointing to his involvement in the murder. On the 22nd of July 1954, Raymond Mies and Gabriel Thiennot are released. President René Coty grants them a presidential pardon. They served half of their sentence, spending 7 years, 6 months, and 14 days in prison. Upon their release, they are welcomed as heroes. From that point on, they tirelessly proclaim their innocence and denounce the scandalous police practices, especially those of Commissioner Darrow, who forced them to sign their confessions. They were released a bit earlier. They speak of a presidential pardon. The presidential pardon wasn't actually a pardon, but a reduction in their sentence because they behaved well in prison. They were granted a sentence reduction, but when people say pardon, it implies that the President of the Republic decided to release them because they were innocent, which is not entirely true. Gradually, the press tires of the story. The key figures move on with their lives, and the case is forgotten. In 1980, a book written by Léandre Boiseau reawakens the memories. You should know that in my family, from a very early age, we were strong supporters of Ms. and Thiennot's innocence. My father didn't know Ms. and Thiennot, but he knew the Thibault brothers, who had just started a butcher shop. He, with his common sense, said, "Why would the Thibault brothers kill a gameskeeper they didn't know when they had just set themselves up as butchers and had a good situation?" It seemed incredible to him, and he didn't believe it at all. There was something inexplicable that had happened, but in his eyes, they couldn't be guilty of that. Then, by chance, my parents hired Gabrielle Thiennot's niece, but that was pure chance. So we ended up taking this niece to visit her uncle in the Melun prison. I remember very clearly I was 10 years old, and I didn't go into the prison. I stayed in the square outside. In my mind, Gabrielle Thiennot was gradually becoming a sort of hero of injustice. When I was a child and as a teenager, Ms. and Thiennot were my Sacco and Vincetti, and I always asked myself what I could do for them. I remember seeing Gabriel Thiennot when he was released from prison, and it was a very powerful moment for me. This boy, this gentle man, how could he be accused of murder? For me, it was impossible. So I was convinced of Ms. and Thiennot's innocence. What could I do for them? I thought, wait, why not write a book about the case? Because I think that writing a book would be a way to give them justice. Titled, "They Are Innocent, the Mies and Thiennot Case," this book becomes the starting point of a tidal wave that will propel the Michel crime into the spotlight of the press, across all media, turning it into a symbol of judicial error. Raymond Mies and Gabrielle Thiennot are, of course, actively involved, and numerous meetings are organized where they passionately describe the torture they endured during their interrogations. The goal now is to get a new trial in order to clear their names. Their lawyers are asking for the removal of the confessions obtained under duress from the investigation file. The fight intensifies. After the formation of the support committee, petitions demanding a review of the trial are submitted to the Court of Cassation, signed by 30,000 people. On the legislative front, after the rejection of the 6th request for a review, the president of the Law Reform Committee told us, "Write to the lawmakers." And well, that's what we're going to do. In 1980, June 1980 to be precise, I had the opportunity to participate in the creation of the support committee, which took place in Belle-Île, not far from Châteauroux. It was a packed room of people who wanted to learn more. And the unique thing about that evening was that all 8 of the protagonists of the case, the 8 hunters, were on the stage, alongside the author of the book They Are Innocent, Léandre Boiseau, and alongside the lawyer, Jean-Paul Thibault, who led the entire judicial battle. It was a very important moment for me as a journalist, and also very emotionally charged on a human level. Despite the intervention of Robert Bandeterre, the Minister of Justice, and lawyer Jean-Paul Thibault, the Ministry of Justice, through a letter dated the 16th of December 1983, rejects the request. This case has taken on an exceptional nature in that it has been judged 3 times by different courts of assize. I regret to inform you that after very careful examination of the results of various investigations conducted to clarify the merits of the elements invoked in the request for a review, and having obtained the opinion of the Criminal Case Review Commission, it was not possible to refer this case to the criminal chamber of the Court of Cassation. However, this negative response did not diminish Ms. and Thiennot's determination, nor that of their support committee. The media continued to champion the idea of judicial error, and several television shows relay Gabriel Thiennot's words, more determined than ever to defend his honor. Several new review requests are filed in 1988, 1993, 1996, 2005, and 2013. But all are met with the same rejection. We need to obtain an amendment to the law on the revision of the trials, an amendment that would state that confessions obtained under torture are null and void, as since the sixth request for a review, the Court of Cassation has recognized that they were victims of torture. This has been officially recognized, and we even found out that it had been acknowledged by the justice system much earlier. This is what President Coty ruled in 1954. The Rogatory Commission that worked on the request from President Coty decided how he would rule, discovered that Ms. and Thiennot, as well as the other 6 who were also sentenced to 2 years in prison, were beaten, tortured, and mistreated for 8 days and nights, and that the officer who conducted this investigation, Commissioner Darrow, was known for this. This is from their report, not mine. So this was known since 1954. But we didn't know it, and we only discovered it when a magistrate from the Court of Cassation did their research. So what we want to achieve is an amendment to the law on reviewing trials that would stipulate that confessions obtained under such conditions will be null and void. In doing so, France would be aligned with what it has agreed to because we signed the New York Convention, which stipulates that confessions obtained under torture cannot be considered valid. Whilst waiting for this new request, Léandre Boiseau and the support committee organized public meetings to explain their ongoing battle. They recently received the support of a significant ally, Michel et Thomas, assistant to René Vautier, the director of the film about the Algerian War, Avant 20 ans dans les Arrêts. Amongst the raw footage left by Vautier, Lou Thomas found testimonies about the Ms. and Thiennot case. These are now being shown to fuel the debate, such as the testimony from Mademoiselle Bennu, the social worker at the prison who received the hunters after their interrogations.
They started to open the cell, because he was in a cell with locks like this. It was dreadful. It was cold, so cold it was horrible. Then they opened the door, and there was a tall, blonde young man. He backed up against the wall. He seemed terrified. If the wall had been 10 kilometers away, he would have backed up against it. He said to me, "It's Miss." I said, presumed, "No, madame." He wasn't crying. "I didn't kill him. I never killed him, I swear to you." I believed him. He looked sad. And then he had a coat. The buttons were torn off. It was all ripped. He was in such a pitiful state. That didn't exactly cheer me up, I assure you. He said, "Now we're going to see the little one." They opened the door, and the little one was at the back. He rushed to my neck, put his head on my shoulder, and said, "Madame, I didn't kill. I swear to you, I didn't kill." And he cried so much. Mr. Villemont took us by the hand, made us sit down, and then he took me away. I can't forget that, you know.
Did you verify in what condition they arrived?
They were all bruised.
Gabrielle?
Gabrielle had bruises. I don't remember exactly where. The tall one was also bruised. He was bruised on his face and on his body.
On his body, yes?
On his body because I saw Emile Thibault. He had broken ribs. So the chief, when he saw them in this condition, he said, "I'm calling Gadot. I can't take responsibility for accepting people like this." Mr. Thiennot called Dr. Gadot and said, "Listen, doctor, you must come here because this really is a very specific case."
This new meeting was a success, and Leandre Boiseau continues to urge the justice system to reconsider the case. Gabriel Thiennot died on the 2nd of June 2003, and Raymond Mies on the 23rd of September 2009. Until the end, they both maintained their innocence. But then, who could have killed gamekeeper Boitard?